Lovely to see you all here, and thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you to my very dear friend Luna for the invitation to be here this evening, and thank you for all of your help 5 years ago when we were in your beautiful country reporting. I was working for TV3 back then, and we were reporting on the devastation of Typhoon Haiyan for our audience here. Thank you to the Leyte Summer Solidarity Foundation too for having me here. So 5 years ago, the 8th of November 2013, you'll know these figures, but let me just remind you, if I may, more than 7,360 people dead or missing, more than 27,000 people injured, more than 1.1 million houses damaged or swept away. I mean, I hadn't heard those figures for a while, but when I looked them up today, it just brought back to my mind immediately the depth of that devastation. It was, as you know, one of the strongest tropical cyclones ever recorded, and the cost of rebuilding was estimated at nearly $6 billion. So we went to the Philippines in the days after Typhoon Haiyan. Myself, my producer Eugene Bingham, and our cameraman Cam Williams. And we returned 6 weeks later to see how the people were faring and how the rebuild was beginning, what progress had been made. This was, as you well know, disaster on a scale that most of us had never seen before. Certainly I had never seen it before, and I had definitely never seen it firsthand before. And 5 years on, it absolutely remains completely etched in my memory. There are certain scenes in particular that will be with me forever, actually. One was driving up the coast from Haiyan towards Tacloban. You'll know that coastal road, perhaps. It was apocalyptic. I'd never seen or experienced anything like it. In every direction you turned, everywhere you looked, there was nothing left. It was just devastation. I don't even really have the words to describe it, to be honest, but we did film it, and the video showed mile after mile after mile of houses just wiped out, just piles of rubble, and people bereft, doing what they could, doing their washing where they could, trying to survive as best they could. We stopped in what remained of one tiny village, and we picked our way through the rubble towards a house that was standing. And there was a woman there. She was about my age, and her daughter in her early 20s had just graduated with her accountancy degree. It was a week on by now from Typhoon Haiyan, and this mother was looking for her daughter, and she'd been looking for a week, and we both knew there was no hope. We didn't have any language in common. We couldn't communicate with each other with words. But this woman who I had never met before, and I knew I would probably never meet again, we just stood there and we held each other and held each other and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and kept on holding each other. And honestly, that remains one of, and will always be, I think, and I will never forget her face, one of the saddest moments of my life. Just further up the road, in one of the most affecting pieces of video from the reporting that we did, Cam filmed from a distance as a man, kind of silhouetted, was picking his way across the debris, slowly, painstakingly, and he was looking for his wife. And I think that he too knew that he wasn't going to find her. That scene will never leave me, and nor will the one that I'm about to describe to you. And I hate to say this because it almost sounds, I hope it doesn't, it seems a little bit disrespectful, but one of the reasons that it will never leave me is because it's the smell that I will never forget. So we pulled up. We weren't even exactly sure where we were, but our driver took us to this place just on the side of the highway near his village just outside of Tacloban. And he wanted to show us this place because he wanted the world to see that the Philippines desperately needed help. That smell, you probably don't need me to tell you, was one of decay. And we realised that what we were looking at was row upon row upon row of body bags lying in the burning sun, and they were waiting for forensic identification. And there was this small team of medical people set up in this temporary morgue, and they were doing their best. There was no power, there was no water. They were doing their best because they wanted to respect the dead and give them identification so that their families could know who they were. Eugene and I started to count the bodies in that field that day, and we gave up because there were too many. That's a scene that I will never ever forget. One of those doctors told us that this was the greatest calamity, he called it, that he had ever witnessed, and he had seen disasters all over the world. And then he gave us his thoughts, his commiserations, his feelings for what had happened to New Zealand, because of course it was the Christchurch earthquake that year as well. And in the midst of this devastation that his country was suffering, he still spared a thought for us. About 80 kilometres south of Tacloban, our vehicle broke down and we ended up stranded in a small village for about 3 hours. This was on a different trip. You went there for this one then, were you? There had been no storm surge. This was inland, but their houses were plundered by the winds of, over 300 kilometres an hour, those winds. And these people had no idea when they would get electricity again. And yet here we witnessed again one of those moments of humanity that gives you hope and joy amidst the devastation, because the children all gathered around us and they were intrigued with us, and they bombarded us with questions because they wanted to practice their English. So we spent hours laughing and singing and talking with these children. One of the young mothers there in that village was worried that our vehicle didn't look like it was about to be fixed and nightfall was approaching. And so even though she had no electricity and she was squeezing her family into her damaged home, she offered us beds for the night. There was a town that you took us to, Luna, on that first trip, and forgive me, I don't remember the name. But Luna and her friends had heard that nobody had been to this isolated town. And so Luna and her friends gathered up supplies, food, water, medical equipment, and they got it together in a truck and we drove to this town. And sure enough, we were the first people they had seen since the typhoon had struck. And while we were filming, we heard that unmistakable sound from the distance of a helicopter's rotor blades. Do you remember that? I'll never forget that either. And the children went running and screaming with excitement and delight onto the open field because they wanted to attract the attention of the pilot to let him know that they needed help, more help than we could give them on that one trip. And the sense of joy and optimism was palpable. And the helicopter circled, and it circled again, and then it flew away. And the children went quiet, and we went quiet too, because that hope and that optimism just dissipated. And that scene will never leave me also. In Tacloban we were staying, this family gave us a bedroom in their 4th floor apartment because there was of course no hotels or anywhere else for us to stay, so they generously let us stay with them. There were all these crucial business documents which were soaked with water, and they were drying out in the stairwell because of course everybody needed their documentation, because I understand you know, that jeepney drivers can't drive without their licenses and the restaurant owners can't open for business without their documentation. So people were doing what they could to try to get commerce started again. And there was a Chinese charity that was paying locals quite well, 500, I think, Filipino a day, to help clean up the mess. We needed a ride, and our taxi was a doctor, a recent medical school graduate who was trying to earn some more money. And so he was using his private car as a taxi. And he was sleeping at the hospital at night because his roof had no house and he didn't feel, you know, dry, for one thing, or safe. And even if he could have found a builder, he couldn't afford to pay for one. And it was heartbreaking for us to see this doctor, this young doctor in his 20s, so upset as he recounted to us in the days after the typhoon striking that they'd run out of supplies at the hospital, that people died because there was no medicine. They had wounds, but the doctors had nothing to treat them with. And they had no morgue at the hospital. And so he told us that they were forced, and I'm sorry if again this seems disrespectful, but it is a sign of how dire things were. They were forced to pile the bodies in a corner. It's another reminder of how awful it was, the things that people, your country folk, had to go through. But we also saw plenty of evidence of grit and fight and determination and humanity. There was a man at a roadside stall who was proud when we were filming his sign, which says, and forgive my pronunciation, Laban, Tacloban, fight Tacloban. Yeah. And Luna took us to a cemetery near, or in her home village, because she wanted us to meet a family who was living there. It blew my mind, still does. A mother who was raising her 11 children. And I remember having a cuddle with that beautiful little baby girl, and for some reason in the middle of a devastation, I had this bright pink nail polish on. And I remember this baby being completely fixated on my fingernails, and I just wanted to hold her and cuddle her and not let her go. You know, when you're surrounded by devastation and there's this beautiful baby, gives you such hope when her family was suffering such a horrific plight. And the other thing that just gave me kind of hope and a sense of normality was one of her older sisters, who was probably about 8, I think, from memory, who was just gently sweeping between the tombstones to try to keep their home tidy. There were some light-up moments too on our trip. That bedroom that I talked about before that the family generously gave us to share. Well, there were 3 of us, myself and my 2 male colleagues, and Cam, the cameraman, is 6 foot something tall. So he got the bed because we thought that he deserved it. I got the mattress on the floor, luckily, and Eugene, the producer, kindly, I don't know why he did this, but he did. He kind of just gathered together like a nest of clothes out of his backpack and slept on the floor. The toilet, of course, wasn't working, but we had to, you know, we were sharing that and doing the best that we could. And it took me a day to realise that the glass door into the toilet from the bedroom you could see through. So that was a bit unfortunate. One of the most spectacularly beautiful sights of my life, actually, after the long trip from Cebu, trying to get the ferry across to Leyte, and of course there were so many people trying to do the same thing, and it was a fight to get on that ferry. And then there was a 5-hour bus trip through the night to get where we wanted to go. And we were shattered when we arrived. And there, running through the night towards us, smiling and waving, was our darling Luna. Thank you for doing that, for looking after us. And she also, I don't know how she did this, organised an incredible dinner for us, gathered together her friends and us, and they somehow pulled off this amazing spread of food. And I ate balu. Yeah, balu. I still can't quite believe that I did it, but I did it. It was an experience. And another incredible and special memory for me is that in amongst the rubble and the ruins of Tacloban, I had my birthday, and my lovely colleagues Eugene and Cam somehow found a cafe kind of restaurant thing, and they got me a birthday dinner. They cooked us a beautiful meal, and I turned 45 in Tacloban, and it was honestly one of my happiest birthdays ever, because I sat there and I realised how lucky I was. Is Nino here, whose Facebook page I saw advertising this tonight, this commemoration? Hi, Nino. I loved what you wrote, which is, when faith is the only weapon to survive, resilience and hope are the only options to move forward for the better. Well, that's what we saw in the Philippines. The people were desperate and hungry and tired and grieving, but they showed us, you know, strangers from a foreign land, incredible warmth and hospitality, and even gratitude for the small part that we were playing in trying to make sure that, you know, some of the rest of the world knew what they were going through. It was very, for me, life-affecting and life-affirming, that resilience and hope that we saw. So I'm very sorry to those of you who suffered loss this day 5 years ago, and to your families who suffered loss, and for everything that you and they have been through. I can only imagine actually how hard it must have been to be here and not really knowing what was happening and only seeing some of the images on the news. I can only imagine. But it is so important, isn't it, that we remember and we acknowledge and we pay our respects. And so I'm very, very honoured to be here with you to commemorate this anniversary 5 years on. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks.